Hi, I'm Mark Rutan. Welcome back to Nomad Boatbuilding. Now, scarfing is a foundational technique in wooden boat building. The most common is called a flat scarf, and that's where we have two pieces of material with matching inclined planes, and we glue them together to create a continuation of grain and provide a lot of structure. We use it for stretching boards out, basically, stretching plywood out, or anytime we need to connect one part to another part and have nothing that supports that joint. Now there's another kind of scarf that I use, and that's called a nibbed scarf. In a nibbed scarf, one of these parts has got a blunt end and the other part gets a haunch. Now there's a lot of advantages to using a nibbed scarf. One of them is that we get a positive stop when aligning these parts. And there's thickness here to allow us to use mechanical fasteners without having a feather edge that can pop free. Now this is really useful when you want to have a glued scarf that also can be stabilized with some mechanical fastenings while that glue dries. So for instance, if it's in a situation where you can't clamp it very easily. Now I like to use nib scarves all the time, especially for rub rails and other sorts of molded details. So now let's take a look at an excerpt from my Black Skimmer Repair series where I'm using a nibbed scarf to remove a section of moldings that are going to have to go back on later on. Okay, so for doing a scarf, normally we want the scarf running outboard, but we're doing repairs, we can't do that. So we're going to run it the other direction. Now I'm going to do a nib scarf because that allows us to easily fasten the scarf material with mechanical fasteners in addition to adhesive. One of the reasons you might use nib scarf is A, you get the mechanical fastening. B, if you've got a molded detail, you can get past that molded detail so you get nice clean lines. So this has got a big round over. What I'm going to do is just use a square to find the point at which that round over stops. Come just a hair past it, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so past it. So just under half an inch. We'll go full half because that way I get enough depth in order to bury my mechanical fastener with a plug. So I've got this wedge, which is a 12-to-1 wedge. It's a nice scarf ratio. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to just slide it in here until I'm touching where I want my nib end to be. In fact, I should probably draw my nib end on there first. So the tape is there just to give me something to draw on. So that'll be where my nib end is. So if I use my square, stick where my nib end is, and then I just slide this wedge until it touches. There's my scarf length. And we're just going to tack this in place. So that's going to act as a guide for me. Now I'll use a handsaw to cut this portion of it, and I could go square in or I could make it an angle. I'm just going to go square because I find that just a lot easier. So there we go, I've touched my wedge. And now the wedge itself is going to act as a guide for my multi-tool here. It's sitting a little bit proud, so I'm going to see if I can't get some tape to hold it down. If I had some hot glue or some cyanoacrylate right now, I would pop that in there, but I don't. I came a little unprepared. I don't have my finishing nails with me and such, which I would normally have.
I just bring myself to do that.
Well, you just have to have the confidence that you're going to be able to put it back together somehow. This technique obviously requires the use of a reciprocating multi-tool. If you don't own one and you're going to repair a boat, go buy one. Okay, so I'm almost through now. So I got a little bit more to do at the tail end. What I want to do right now is I'm going to pre-drill for this fastener so that we put this back together. It's going to go right into the same hole. Now, of course, we've got a little bit of a gap, but we're going to fill that with thickened epoxy anyway. So it'll give us a nice clean line all the way around, and hopefully it's be a relatively nice finish when we're done. Okay, so I think we're free all the way through. the nibbed here. Should be a ripping blade, but I don't have it. Go. Now I just got a little bit back here to deal with. I can get that wedge out of there now. Okay, that should do it. Now all the fasteners that are in our way is a separate problem altogether. There's absolutely nothing fun about this part of the job. We're basically going to have to cut every one of these fasteners free. Luckily they're bronze, but unluckily I'm using these exchange blades, and they are really terrible. They just do not work efficiently whatsoever. But that's all I've got on hand, so I just soldier on. Now these rub rails didn't seem to be bedded in anything exactly, but at the same time there was some kind of gunk in there. It wasn't a flexible adhesive. It felt more like maybe he put a coat of polyester resin on the back side of these and then slammed the guards on. I couldn't quite tell, but it meant that I had a whole lot of kind of grinding through every inch of that seam, and then every now and then I'd hit a fastener and have to spend a bunch of time just slowly whittling away at that until they broke free. And then one of my patrons, Bob, says I need to have a dog in all of my videos if I want them to go viral. So here you go, Bob. That's a dog. And now back to the ugly work of getting this guard off. And now you can see why I put those spring clamps on the back of the guard there earlier on. I knew it was going to pop and fall. Okay. So there we've basically got a scarf that's ready to go. Let's do a little bit of cleanup on it, but for the most part, she's done. This is gumwood, so it's really tough stuff. Anyway, we'll tuck that away someplace safe, and we'll move on to the next job. So as you can see, a nib scarf can be really useful for making a cleaner line around molded details, but also in the case of this rub rail, when I go to put it back on after the repairs are done, it's very easy for me to align it to where it was in the first place, especially because I drilled that first fastening hole. That's going to be basically the index that aligns it back to where it was. Now of course I've lost a little bit of material in that scarf. We could add a little shim in there if we really wanted to bulk it out to the same depth that it was, or we could use some particularly heavily thickened epoxy and just be careful about how deep we push that screw when we first insert it. Now think about any of the other situations in which you could use a nib scarf. I find it particularly nice to use in planking that's going to get varnished, because a nibbed scarf is going to give you just a nice thin clean line, whereas a flat scarf is going to have sort of a fuzzy tapered edge where you can have a lot of glue showing. So you can get a really clean result by using a nibbed scarf, and even when there's mechanical fastenings it can look nice and neat with just a few little tacks along the edge of a nibbed scarf line. Now if you enjoyed this little segment and you want to see the rest of the Black Skimmer series, which is underway at the moment, you're going to have to join me over on Patreon. Now you can get free access for a week, and if you like it and you want to stick around, you can get full access for as little as $2 a month. Now the funds that I earn over on Patreon pay for the time I spend making videos for you over here on YouTube. So I hope you'll consider that and help me out there. So if you found that interesting, why don't you check out this video over here where I used a nib scarf in our Bushi-Dori project when we did the cap rails. Okay, that's it for today folks. Happy scarfing. Catch you later.